Hello, and welcome to Spirit Among Us. So none of us are perfect. We live in an imperfect world, and we generally admit that. We generally accept that truth, that the world we live in is not perfect, and the people around us aren't perfect, and we aren't perfect. We all make mistakes, and we can agree on this. But we also all disobey God. We all sin. And while we don't really like to admit this, we are all sinners. Hearing this at first and realizing this can be crushing. It can be a really hard thing to hear. It's a huge blow to our pride when we are reminded of our failures and when we're reminded of our disobedience to God. But while it may be uncomfortable to hear, and while we may not enjoy hearing it, it is not a bad thing to know about our sin. Because when we realize that we are all sinners, then we can really start to see what kind of a gift we have in Jesus. Romans chapter 5 verses 6 through 8. For while we were still weak, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So here's the truth. God didn't choose us because we're heroic. God didn't choose us because we're some mighty people, or because we're strong, or because we're brave or courageous. That's not why God has chosen us. He didn't even choose us because we're good, or because we're worthy of being chosen, or any of that. God didn't choose us for those things because the truth is, none of those things apply to us. We all fall short of these. We all fall short of being worthy of God. But the thing is, God knew that, and God knows that. That's not something that's unfamiliar to him. He understands that completely. But at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. Now I want you to think about that for a second. Christ died for the ungodly. Our sin and our unrighteousness was no mystery to God, is no mystery to God. He knows it completely, and he knows every mistake we've made and every mistake we will make. But God shows his love for us in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So right here, this is why it's important to understand our sin. While we may not like hearing about it, hearing that we are sinners, that we make mistakes, that we fall short and we disobey God, the truth is it brings him glory and it reveals his great love. We are God's chosen people. As Christians, we are God's chosen people, but that's not because we're special. That's not because we're different from everyone else. We're all sinners in this world. We're all sinners in the same boat, heading down a river to a very bad place. But God saw us in the midst of our sin. He saw us in the midst of our disobedience, helpless and hopeless. Even if we weren't aware of that, even if we weren't aware that we were helpless, he saw that and he rescued us. So this is what I want to remind us of today, that God chose us in the midst of our sin. He didn't choose us because we were special or because we were set apart or because we were good, because we weren't good. We weren't any of those things. We were sinners, and we are sinners, but God chose us in our sin. But this is who our God is. While we were still sinners, while we were still disobeying God, he chose us. Thank you for watching, and God bless.